Hi. So hopefully we are live across a few platforms. We should be live across Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube for today's chat with the lovely Fenella Hemus, who I like to call an NLP guru. But I think that's probably not how you describe yourself, is it?
I wouldn't describe myself as a guru. I would describe myself as utterly passionate about NLP for its use for everything in life, really. I live and breathe NLP, essentially. And whenever I can share it for people to find use for themselves with it, I do, basically. So I train coaches and leaders.
Well, not saying that I'm necessarily a leader, but you're definitely my NLP guru. I think that's what I'll say. You're my NLP guru. So we met through local networking. We were in a lovely networking group together, and we still are, but it's changed a bit. Different people and different places, but it was lovely because it was a very small group, and I got to hear all about what you did and the history of how you got into NLP. And I've worked with you, and you've worked with several members of my family as well. And I love it. Really changed things for me. I still need to continue with it, and I'm doing your training in a month's time to become a practitioner, which is really exciting because I know I use lots of it when I'm helping clients, but it's a bit sort of whatever's stuck in my head that I would share with my clients rather than a thought through process particularly. And that's what I want to do because I think it would really help people I work with. So I wanted to ask you a lot about that today. But first, maybe tell me your breakthrough moment with NLP. And NLP, let's explain it to people what it is as well, as simply as possible, which is always really difficult because it means lots of things to lots of people.
I will explain it. So NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And the programming part is often what puts people off because they've just got this idea about them being programmed, but nothing could be farther from the truth. So neuros of the mind, so it's our five senses, how we receive the world, how we experience the world through our five senses, plus our self-talk. And then the linguistic is the language. So basically it's how we communicate to ourselves and to other people, both verbally and non-verbally, so all through body language. And then the programming are essentially the habits, the strategies that we develop to do things, everything, to how we love people, how we decide about things. All our behaviors, essentially, is we create programs that we run again and again and again. So essentially, in our brains, we'll do something like that. You know, most of our behavior is unconscious, but we're running a pattern. Every time our mind will do the same thing over and over again because it wants to save energy. So it's always looking for shortcuts to find the easiest way to do something, which is why consciously habits are so hard to break because it's all unconscious and it happens in milliseconds. So essentially, NLP is the user's manual for the mind. So when I talk to people, sometimes they'll say, well, I do that normally. And it's this. All of this we do normally, but it's about making that conscious so we can change it to make it work really effectively. So essentially, it's also the study of excellence. So it came from observing different really highly successful practitioners or people in their fields to identify, okay, what is it that they do that makes things work? So it is the study of I've just sort of forgotten the word.
Excellence.
Essentially, excellence. It's a study of excellence. How do successful people do what they do to get the results? And if we can, it's modeling that. So when we can model that, then we can essentially achieve the same thing. Now, it's not about faking it till you make it. It's about going much deeper than that and understanding the values behind why someone does something, the beliefs that they have installed in themselves to do something, and synthesizing just the essence of what they do, installing it in ourselves, and then just behaving in that way. And that sounds, like wave a magic wand. Well, it's not. But what it does is it shortcuts a lot of things.
I suppose it's like we pick up and learn things and we adapt, and maybe at the age of which we started to do something, we just went with what it was then, and as we get older we realize, there might be a more helpful or effective way to do that, but it's breaking that habit. And it doesn't mean that what you've been doing is wrong necessarily. It's just maybe not been the most effective for you, because it's literally a habit that you formed really young, when, you know, it was just instinctively formed, and there's ways to adapt it to modern life or to the way you want to live today. Yeah. So I think I had to fight with that in the beginning, because it was like, and I was also really worried about doing it, because I thought, so stupid, that I would then regret that I'd had all these feelings before. But it doesn't do that. It's just about the future. It isn't looking back on the past and all that you did wrong. It's just about making helping you be able to go into the future, doing what you want to do, doing things how you'd like to do them, rather than just always thinking, oh, I wish I'd done it like that, or I can't change, or all these things. And I think I talk to a lot of people who are like, I've just always been nervous at public speaking. I've just always been rubbish at it. So, I mean, Claire, you're going to help a bit, but I'm still going to be rubbish. And it's me with my limited knowledge of NLP going, no, just go forward. Each time's a new time. Pick some of the tips we've learned and do it. The one I love is the imagine the positive outcome. Imagine what it will be like when it's lovely, and just think about that. It's to think about the good things. But it's very hard, isn't it, for us to break that. But what about? And that's what the NLP stops you. It stops you focusing on the negative. It just focuses on the positive and the moving forward, I think. Is that correct? Or have I
yes, that's absolutely, absolutely, completely correct. So the thing about we're unconscious sponges in the first 7 years of our life. We just absorb information. Those habits and the patterns that we develop, they served us at some point. We don't do things from, you know, because we just feel like it. Everything is essentially about us protecting ourselves, us looking after ourselves. We develop some patterns which then become, well, they're going to hold us up. So the negative thinking, the self-sabotage and the self-doubt comes as a result of us being told certain things when we're younger, us having certain experiences. So, and when you mentioned that whole thing about visualizing the outcome, the positive outcome, is, you know, we're very good at visualizing when someone's saying, I can't do this, I can't do that. So they're essentially visualizing the negative outcome. So all it is just saying, okay, let's do something different. And when I say to someone, for example, you know, imagine how you're going to feel. And that's the other thing that's really important, is making it sensory. So what you're going to see, what you're going to hear, and what you're going to feel. Because the more senses you involve, the more powerful the imagining can be. And when some people say, well, it's not working, it's like, well, actually, yeah, you're not following my instructions. What are you going to see, hear, and feel 15 minutes after the successful outcome of your presentation? Because it is likely to be successful then, and it will be successful because we do everything twice. Our brain is fantastic at imagining things. Then we imagine it and then we do it. So once we have that thought in our mind that we're imagining success, our mind will think about creating success or looking for something that's going to give us success.
The self-talk thing is very interesting there, because I remember when I first started working with you, I remember hearing you talk about it at networking groups, and I got really frustrated one day because I think you said to everybody, try and imagine the last time you were really, really happy. And then what happens is your brain goes, I can't remember, I can't think of something, therefore I must never have been happy. And then you start going to the spiral of, I haven't been happy for ages, what's wrong with me? And then I got really upset because everybody else was going, oh my God, that was amazing for now. And I was thinking, well, I feel utterly rubbish now, because it was just because my imagination, and I don't know whether this is something culturally that we know we use our imagination all the time, but is there a point when we're being told to stop faffing around, stop daydreaming, something in my head was like, it wasn't allowing me to imagine on instruction. So I could daydream the days away, but I had a real problem with that. And I know, actually, because you work with my husband, he said that was the thing he struggled with. When someone says, imagine the positive outcome, it was hard to do because of the negativity of the way we might think. And I felt, oh no, I can't do it. I must be someone who's just a massive pessimist and I'm never going to be helped, and, you know, spirals of chaos in my head. So what is it? Is it something, why have we stopped being able to imagine on you know, immediately? What is that?
I mean, I think that there are several different reasons why. I think essentially our society is based on, you know, the brain is wired to notice negativity. For some, it does more than others. It's something that I've kind of found quite challenging because I'm wired for optimism, and I'm surrounded by, you know, I grew up with a mum who was very optimistic. I grew up with a dad who was very negative. It was interesting, the kind of, I could see the parallel. And I chose to follow the optimism of my mum. So for some of us, perhaps it's easier. But I do think that we are discouraged from using our imagination so much in school, and we're limited by other people. And we, as children, we take on the limitations of our teachers, of people around, because, as I said, we're absorbing stuff. And so the cycle goes on. And whereas, you know, it's like teachers will tell children to do something a certain way, but and not do certain things because of their own fears, and adults too. And simply what they do is the children learn those fears. They learn to be anxious. They learn to be stressed. They learn, it's just a pattern, it's a wiring. So to stop it, if it's really difficult for somebody, that's when we start looking at changing limiting beliefs. And changing limiting beliefs is where we have to go to the root cause. We have to identify what is the structure of that limiting belief. What's the process that someone goes through to do their limiting belief? And when we can change something in that structure, it will feel different inside them. So essentially, NLP is what we call is a pattern interrupt. We interrupt the pattern, and then the interrupt becomes part of the new pattern. So they learn to do things differently. They can't actually access the old way of doing it so easily. So it kind of it speeds things up, if you like. It's not conscious. It's where the conscious and unconscious start working together. And so there are different ways of doing that in NLP. So NLP is essentially just using different tools to find if something doesn't work with somebody, with a client, try something different. It's about experimentation, essentially. So practitioner level is just where you learn everything longhand. And then, because it's to learn the real and get really confident in the grounding. And then master practitioner is when you start going into the experimentation yourself. You learn how different ways you can combine things, because it's about meeting individuals where they are to find out what works for them. And that's why I think that's my, you know, why I loved it. That was where my breakthrough moment actually came, where I was like, whoa, just makes every single bit of a jigsaw fit together in my life.
Yeah, I think it isn't. Yeah, and it's lots of studying. I'm going to do your practitioner course, and there's lots of reading beforehand and stuff, and it's quite there's a lot to take in and understand, and I think it's really hard to explain it quickly in half an hour. I haven't got it. I want to come up with that perfect 30-second explainer of what NLP is, but I guess that's something that you work on and you're happy with. I think what people get interested in, and obviously I know that lots of people use it in business. It's a really effective tool. And sometimes if you can't convince somebody of the value to them personally, you can convince them of the value to them in business. And I thought it'd be good to talk about that today, because obviously it's going out, certainly going out on one of the business platforms as well, on LinkedIn. And I know there are lots of people, you'll look through their titles and they'll say they're an NLP master practitioner, and they've obviously seen the point. So how could you sum up the value of using NLP in business?
So what NLP enables an individual to do is to be able to, first of all, it increases emotional intelligence. That's a fundamental, because it enables us to communicate with ourselves better, so we can get better results. So we can identify when our behavior is not helping us, or is not helping the teams that we're working with. So as a leader, it enables people to lead much more compassionately and meet the needs of their team the way the individual people work. So, as I said, start from the leader, increases emotional intelligence. It increases our ability to regulate ourselves, so to deal with stress without kind of losing the plot, and put ourselves in a state where we can find solutions, in problem-solving state. So there are techniques that enable people to kind of, emotional regulation, state management. So for presentation, anytime you have to stand up in front of a crowd of people. And then also in terms of influencing, negotiating, mediating, it enables somebody to really understand and identify how different people, their preferred communication styles. because we tend to communicate with our own style preferentially. And if you're talking to someone who doesn't have the same style, and you need to get them, because we need to influence people if we want something to be done. And if we're missing how that person communicates, and we're communicating in a different way, they're not going to understand what we're talking about. And we're not going to get the results that we're looking for, because they're going to misunderstand us. And so the same thing with motivating teams. It's really, really useful. So, sharing that knowledge with teams so they can then understand each other more, understand how each other communicates, understand how each other is going to get the best results. And sales. Sales is another major area. We're always selling. Whatever we do, we're selling our ideas. Whether we're selling we're selling our persuading people to take on our ideas. And if we don't do that in a language that another person understands, then that's going to miss. It's going to we're going to come up against resistance. So there's about rapport, and there's about identifying the little nuances about how people communicate to understand how to communicate back and get the results. And you know inside that you've communicated with them.
I think
so that's essentially it.
Yeah, because you look back on things that may have gone wrong or didn't go the way you wanted in business or in anything, but it's often it was a communication breakdown, or you might not see it as a communication breakdown. It'd be the other person was being difficult, whatever. But essentially, if you weren't talking on the same level, you weren't getting each other. Whereas I think that NLP bit can help you. It's like a deeper level of empathy, because you just see the other person's point of view and be able to kind of talk to them on their level as well. Like I say, when people are really good at talking to someone on their level, we always think that's a complimentary thing. So I guess that's what the NLP will help you with. And you always think, God, I wish I'd had bosses who were trained in NLP, because I would have just got it better. Yes, they probably would have been able to not manipulate me, but persuade me more into doing what they wanted. But they would have done it in a way that I would have felt I was doing what I wanted. They would have got what it meant to me when they were explaining something.
And that's the key thing behind NLP. A lot of people do think it's about manipulation. Now there's a line, manipulation and influence. It's about doing it with the best intent to create a win-win outcome. It's not about doing to people, it's doing with people. So It's the highest level of ethics in terms of ecology, thinking, what is the best outcome here that's going to get the other person to feel good and me to feel good as well, and get the results that we're looking for. So there are different ways of, negotiating. There's, hypnosis is useful in business as well. And if you listen to the way the politicians talk, they're talking hypnotic language all the time.
Yeah.
So you can use language to influence people, and by being really aware of the language that we use and the potential it has to influence people, and the potential power it has, or the potential negative influence it can have on people, is incredibly, it's incredibly useful to increase the level of success in business in terms of being able to increase productivity by just knowing how to do things more consciously, essentially. Individual team members to know how to behave, and also understanding people's deep preferences as well. There's process things in NLP that will allow, you've heard it like Myers-Briggs and the personality typing. Well, NLP can do a lot of that in much less time than Myers-Briggs, and get essential, so for recruitment, it's really useful as well to get the best new member of staff, to know how long they're probably going to stay in a job, and also what you need to do to ensure that they're having a good experience while they're working for you.
Yeah, it's not meant to be used for evil, as you say, but obviously you can't stop the way some people will behave. But we're being influenced and manipulated all the time when we listen to the radio and the news and politicians, and anybody's got an axe to grind or an opinion. And I think it's really helped me, though, in a way. I could tell that something wasn't right sometimes, but it's now being able to really make me see sometimes how I feel after reading something or seeing something. Actually stop, take a look back and go, how was I potentially led to that point by someone's clever use of linguistics to get me to that point? So that was quite interesting, to make me analyze things a little bit more deeply. But what want to do for people today is, I mean, I always say to people, like, if you're going to talk to a room full of people and you're really nervous, I say, imagine the two people you'd like to be talking to, who you wish were in the room, and just talk to them. And the other one is that imagine a lovely, happy, smiley crowd of people and how it feels when they're all clapping at the end and going, "Well, she was brilliant. I like that. Oh, wow." You know, try and picture all those things. But what would be, I mean, what do you do? Or probably it's inherent now, but what would be a good tip, do you think, for people who are, I think that's what stops people, and particularly virtually, people are really struggling with talking into a screen. I mean, I am talking to you and I know you, and that's easier to do. But if I was talking into a blank screen now, where I don't know what people's reactions are, and I'm nervous, because that's what I get a lot of people do. It just seems so weird. There's no one there.
Yeah.
I know I'm putting you on the spot a bit, but what would you say is an effective, give me one of your tools.
Excuse me. Well, in addition to what you said, I think is you go into the presentation beforehand with the outcome in mind. And the other thing, and I think the good thing about what your suggestion is when we get nervous, obviously we're focusing on ourselves. So the whole thing is we need to be, and again, I kind of say, well, that's a bit selfish, isn't it? It's like, how about, imagine what you're giving to other people. Imagine the gems that you are giving people. And prior to that, I would do is I do things like breathing. I kind of center myself. It's kind of going into what we call the coaching state. So it's expanding my awareness, literally. And what that does, so if you go into more soft focus, as yes, I might be staring at a dot now rather than you, but I can still see you because I'm relaxed. Yeah. And it's essentially doing that when you're standing in front of a crowd as well. So what you do is you actually go into a more relaxed state. Literally, you will turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest. You will slow your heart rate. You will lower your pulse. And what you'll also do is you will be able to access your mind. So I say sometimes to people is what you can do is, and this is good for kids, is imagine a tangerine beforehand. Imagine there's a tangerine on top of your head here. Or you can imagine it in your hand first. You imagine the colors and you imagine, the texture, etc., and then you put it up here. And the reason you put it up here is what it does is it expands your awareness, and it's about accessing, slowing down your brain waves and accessing your unconscious mind. And when you access your unconscious mind, you access the information that you so desperately want for your presentation. And then you can kind of go into more of a flow. And it's about, that's more same thing as you're suggesting. It's taking yourself out of yourself into the room, essentially. So that's one thing I would do. But also the breathing is kind of get state management beforehand, is prepare yourself, get yourself, again, you were talking about sitting. For me, sitting in front of me have to be either standing or sitting up high, because you've got to be able to get that energy out. Otherwise, if you're sitting like I'm sitting on you're sitting in a low sofa, I've noticed when people present, the energy
they disappear.
The energy is like that. So it is just quite a lot of body language. Yourself is body language, literally. I think that's about.
It is really, and it's getting the balance, because as you say, you're trying to get into your calm mind, and the orange thing sounds weird, and it's like, no, all it is that if you're starting to imagine something else in the room, you're taking it out of you and you're just going, as you say, into the room and into and you're using your imagination, and then that will stimulate things inside your head to say the right thing. But then there's also the energy, which is what's missing for a lot of people. But I generally think if they can turn it away from themselves into what they're giving, as you say, sharing and giving information to other people, being of value, it's not about you and your ego and how you look and everything else. It's about the experience for others. So yes, the way that you're set up and lit is important, just because it's what others can see, not because it's making you, look great. It's the concept of you're giving a nice thing for people to look at that's easy, that they're not squinting to see what, are you hidden in the darkness or whatever. But it's just making it about your audience all the time. But that extra little bit to give you the confidence, because you can do it really deep, 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 deep down. Otherwise you wouldn't have been asked to do it. It's that getting out of your own, as you say, potentially the negativeness that you keep in your mind, and just putting it into an extra sphere or vision. I don't know. It's that extra bit I'm getting to struggle with the wording, but it's there's so many things going on when someone talks to a group of people, aren't there? It's sharing of information, it's sharing of knowledge, it's entertainment, it's all these different things. But if you narrow it down, it's just two people communicating. So it's, how do you get out of those places of worry and fear? As you say, you imagine something so that your imagination takes over, you calm yourself, you center yourself. But there's like, I feel like there's I don't know what it is that stops. We're stopped from enjoying the experience and doing it confidently and happily because of something that's holding us back in childhood or life or something, aren't we? Generally, it's normally nerves of talking in public or that bit of dreading reading aloud, and we go back into that place.
And essentially, there is no quick fix around that if it is a deep-seated unconscious belief, because that's the thing about when we talk about fake it till you make it. If you're consciously going, yeah, I can do this, but unconsciously your unconscious mind is going, no, you can't.
Yeah.
Who's going to win?
Going to win the unconscious.
The unconscious mind is, because it's wired in so well. So then that's when other work needs to be done in terms of removing limiting beliefs and changing limiting beliefs, which is a bit more of an involved process, which we use in NLP, which I use in coaching in NLP, different processes. And then that literally changes somebody's strategy for doing something. So everything, that strategy for feeling rubbish when you're presenting, the feeling rubbish when you're presenting is a limiting belief, but it's also a strategy. It's something you do again and again. It's a path. You'll perhaps see something in your head. You'll say something to yourself, and then that will come out with your behavior, which is essentially a strategy. So
we can give people tips, and people can use lots of tips from NLP in their lives. But if something's very deep seated, I have had a couple of clients and I've worked with them, and I think afterwards, I'm not sure that I've changed that much for them because they had so much else holding it back. And with one of them, I was able to say, I think you need a bit of some form of therapy or counseling or help. I didn't know about NLP at that time, just to help you because you've got trauma, something there that's stopping you speaking out from your past. Or, it was clear from some of the things they said that clearly had some horrendous experiences that are even my great tips and advice and help wasn't going to get to. It was like spreading it on top of something that didn't, that wasn't going to absorb it. It was like there was a impermeable layer between. None of it was going to filter through, really. Intellectually, yes, but not physically, not emotionally. So I'd love, and I always feel like there's a limit with some people that to the degree that I can help them, which is why I want to understand more about NLP and build up to master NLP and stuff and use it in my training. Definitely. But again, I still think I might go, even at that level, I think you need to go do proper NLP now, because I could do a little bit, but you need to be consciously solving this problem deep inside.
Yeah, and that's with not just NLP, but the combination of hypnosis and timeline therapy. That's why I teach all three. Is that that's exactly what you can do. Is you can work with the trauma part. It's like it doesn't necessarily, people don't necessarily need the counselling. It's about, okay, this is a
therapy, some form of
therapy. And so we call it timeline therapy, but it's also, creating your future coaching. Essentially, it's about coaching someone to practice how they're going to do their new behavior in the future. So the therapy part is, some people want to feel heard for their trauma. That's fine. But it's also, we reframe things, because that's the other thing about NLP. NLP is massively about reframing. So people can start, it's a perspective. We each have our memory, it's a perspective. And as the decision comes at last is like, do you want to do things differently? Because if a person, we have something called what we call secondary gain, is if a person sometimes gets the pain of the problem, there is a pain in there, but they get something from doing their problem. We always call it doing your problem, you're not able to, doing your fear of speaking. It's a way, it's a pattern. But if someone's getting something from that as well, that's worth more than the pain, then they won't let go of it.
Yeah.
So it's about working at that level as well, and identifying, okay, we can't leave a gap. we need to identify something that's going to be strong enough to replace it, to strong enough so that the draw towards the positive is stronger than the negative. And that's why, again, other techniques we use, something like anchoring. We create anchors that can change people's state. People can override anything. They can override any of the things that they learn, because NLP is really about increasing choice as well, increasing the choice of how to behave, giving people more resources in any situation. It's not about taking anything away. It's just about enabling people to be more adaptable and flexible, to have more success in their lives, to get the results that they're essentially looking for without so much struggle. So, we can delve deep into people's values. We can identify whether they move away from or towards certain things. If they move away a lot of the time, they're going to have challenges, because if you move away from say, for example, if you move for money, if you move away from poverty, you're moving away from not having money. When you've got quite a lot of money, there's no motivation, because you're quite a long way from poverty. So you'll get drawn back to poverty. And that's kind of delving in a little bit deeper. But all of these little things affect how people behave. So we can remove trauma. And I think it's useful, because the mind's always looking for closure. Because it hasn't had closure, it's not going to move forwards.
There's so many subtleties in what holds us back from doing things. I mean, we can have general ones that affect most of us, but everybody's got their own little things or big things or whatever. Or sometimes there's a little thing that's become a really big thing that holds you back. The limiting belief can be based on a very small thing that's held you back for a long, long time. And it is completely unbelievably refreshing when it's like a massive load off your mind, or just a hugely freeing, as you say, liberating, when you go, I don't think like that anymore. I just don't. It's not a matter of I just don't think like something anymore. It's really bizarre when it happens. And you think, oh, I thought I was going to have all this, like, oh, but I don't think this. It's like, it's just suddenly you don't think the way you used to think about something. And it's incredibly, like, yeah, I would suggest to anybody really to look into it a little bit more and learn about it, because it can be it could be really transformative, life-changing. To things that are holding you back in life, or you always regret, or you always worry about. It just takes that load. Then there'll be something else, of course, that's life. But the point is, you then got to learn some tools to stop these big things holding you back.
And what it does is, yes, there'll be other things that come on in life, but when you reach those other things, they won't be so big, because you'll have those resources, those tools, the capability and to be able to deal with it. So essentially, NLP it increases resilience as well. It increases our capability to deal with, for this, we've been in a situation for a year, and the levels of stress on people, but we have a choice to how we respond to stress, because we're the only animals that can create that feeling of stress just by our thoughts. When you understand all of that, when in NLP, you have more resources to be able to go, okay, I'm not paying attention to that. I'm going to deal with this in a different way. I know what's going on at the moment. Okay, I'm going to reframe how I look at something. I'm going to look at this from a different perspective. So you have lots and lots of different ways of kind of responding to a very challenging situation, to responding to disasters, to responding to curveballs, to responding, we're all going to feel in the moment, we're going to feel a bit, or, however, and that's absolutely fine, because we're emotional beings and it's important to experience our emotions. But what it does is it enables people to move forward with less stress. And that is essentially much better for their health as well, for your health as well, because stress, it really affects physical health too. So, yeah.
I always like to think of it as in, well, any of these things, where it's another thing in the toolbox to being a grown up, to getting through, all the stuff that you didn't pick up at school. You might be nearly 50 or whatever, like me, before you start to learn some of it. But, every time you learn something new, it's like, oh, okay, that's really useful for all these situations and for all these things. It's another being grown up thing. I wish they'd taught me when I was at school, but
I wish they would teach. I wish, I thought teachers being taught NLP, children being taught to understand their minds, we wouldn't end up with some of the situations or some of the lack of resilience there is generally with in society and with children. But you were saying, you know, I just don't think like that. And that's what, you know, it's an example of neuroplasticity. So what had happened is your old neural pathway to do whatever the negative thing before just got weaker, and the new neural pathway was just you know, it was laid down in your unconscious mind and practiced a little bit in your unconscious mind. So it had a good head start, if you like, because you just didn't know how to do the old way anymore, and so the new way got repeated and repeated, and so that neural pathway got stronger and stronger. And there's a literal change in your brain between in the neural pathways. I always give an example of giving up smoking. Yeah. Because giving up smoking is really hard for a lot of people, and it's because they've got literally an information superhighway, like a motorway, going through their minds about, you know, liking smoking, whereas the not liking smoking is probably just like a little itty bitty path through a bit of wasteland or something.
And they strengthen it.
You've got to swap the two over. Yeah.
It is, so we can do that as an adult, because that's what we see as children. If you ever watch those videos about how babies and brains are formed or whatever, and they do all those wonderful kind of graphics and pictures of the neural pathways just starting, and new ones and new ones and new ones, and you see that with babies when one day they can't do something and the next day they can, and the next day they can do the next thing, and you're like, wow, you know, we could still do that. It's just a little bit more effort than because our brains are older and more wired in that way, but we can change the wiring. We can rewire ourselves.
Always. And I remember, because I'm old enough, I remember being told when I was young that by the age of 35, that was it. My brain cells were dying. And
Excellent.
Thank heavens. And you're like thinking, well, you know, and use it or lose it, you know, there's no hope. And then I'd always questioned that. I've always questioned it and thought, well, how is it that people learn to walk again if they're, you know, and people would put across as if it was like miracles in the past, essentially. And I'd be like, well, they're not special people. They just made a different decision. And that's about everything. And this is where NLP is about real personal responsibility, and it can be quite challenging, because it's about moving us from being at the effect of other things being done to us into cause, where we're like, okay, that happened. What am I going to do about it? So we have a choice. We always have a choice in any situation. Even if we have an accident, we have a choice, which is quite challenging to some people.
We've talked for ages now, and it's such an intense subject, and I know you could talk about it for ages. I don't want to go on and on and on NLP with people, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it, because it has given me more information, and I hope people listening, and you don't know how many people are listening, and these things get replayed, and whoever listens to it over whenever, that you get maybe a different understanding about neurolinguistic programming and how it can help you. And we talked about how it can help in business, talked about little things you can do when you want to present yourself better, is to think when you're going to do some presenting online, and it can be something you're nervous about, or in a room, or public speaking. So some really good tips in there. So thank you so much, Fenella. I look forward to learning more at your feet about NLP.
Not at my feet.
No, you know what I mean. We're all going to be sitting cross-legged. We're sitting cross-legged watching.
When I no. Oh gosh, that's no.
That's a different kind of.
We are learning together. You see, that's the other thing. I'm always learning from every single person that I train and every single one of my clients. That's another amazing thing about what I do. Just learn from them. So it's a never-ending journey. So yeah, it's amazing. But thank you so much for having me. I just love talking about this stuff, as you can see. So.
No, it's brilliant. Thank you, Fenella. I'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
All right, then, Claire. Bye-bye.
Bye.